It seems like everywhere you turn these days, anyone's talking about data and tech in India and the sheer speed of it all. It's really quite mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So for this deep dive, we're going to really try and unpack what's happening.
Right.
We've got an in-depth report that looks at the Indian data center landscape.
Hmm.
We really want to try to make this your go-to resource for getting a handle on what's happening. We want to find those key takeaways, those sort of aha moments that will help you understand this really dynamic sector.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at this thematic research report. It's a pretty comprehensive overview, and one thing that jumps out right away is the massive scale of the growth. We're talking about a potential $100 billion enterprise value by 2030 just for the colocation data center market. That's just one slice of the pie.
Wow.
So before we dive in, let's take a step back. What exactly is a data center? I think for a lot of people, it sounds very technical and a bit mysterious.
Yeah, you can think of it as a physical building, a very secure, environmentally controlled facility that houses mission-critical IT infrastructure.
Okay.
That's the backbone that enables all the digital services we rely on. Like, think about online banking, streaming movies, all those things rely on these data centers.
Oh, wow.
So within a data center, you have powerful servers doing the computing. You've got vast storage systems holding all that data, and then sophisticated networking gear connecting it all.
So it's not just a room full of computers, it's a whole ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very specialized environment.
So who actually uses data centers? I think there's a perception that it's mainly the domain of those big tech giants, but is that really the case?
While the massive cloud providers, like your AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, they are huge consumers.
Right.
The reliance on data centers is far, far broader. Governments use them for everything from citizen services to national security. The fast-growing AI and high-performance computing sectors, they're heavily dependent on data centers. The entire BFSI sector, so banking, financial services, and insurance, they all rely on them for transactions and regulatory compliance. Then you have telecommunications companies powering our mobile and internet networks, media and entertainment for streaming and gaming content.
Wow.
Even e-commerce and retail are managing global operations through data centers, and even healthcare and life sciences for things like medical imaging and research. It's really a diverse user base.
It's amazing when you lay it out like that, how many different industries are actually touching these things.
Pretty much every sector is touched by data centers in some way these days.
So who are the companies actually building and operating these data centers in India? Is it the same set of players across the board, or is there a mix?
You see a really interesting mix of ownership models. On one hand, you have the large hyperscale cloud providers who often build and operate their own massive data centers. These are tailored to their specific needs. They need enormous scale. But then you have these specialized colocation providers. These are companies like NTT, STT, Cephi, C-S. They build these multi-tenant data centers.
Okay.
They lease out space, power, cooling to a variety of organizations.
Interesting.
And then we're also seeing interest from real estate developers, telecom companies looking to leverage their infrastructure, and even financial institutions are starting to recognize the growth potential in the data center space.
So it's becoming a much more diverse landscape.
Absolutely. A lot of different players are getting in on the action.
Now, when we talk about the size or capacity of a data center, how do we actually measure that? Is it the physical size of the building, or is there something else going on?
That's a great question. And it might be surprising to some, but the primary way we measure capacity is not actually by square footage.
Oh, okay.
It's actually by power consumption,
Interesting.
typically measured in megawatts, MW.
So like the electrical lifeline of the facility.
Exactly. Think of it as that. It tells you the total electrical load the data center can handle at any given time.
Yep.
And because the amount of computing power is directly tied to the electricity available, this power consumption figure is the most critical factor in understanding a data center's true capacity.
It's like the fuel that powers the whole thing.
Exactly. And just to put it into perspective, a single rack filled with servers can draw anywhere from 5 to 50 kilowatts of power.
Wow.
So a large data center might need hundreds of megawatts to operate.
That is some serious power.
Absolutely. It's a massive scale.
Now, this whole data center ecosystem, I mean, this didn't just pop up overnight, right? Can you give us a quick rundown of how data centers have evolved to where they are today?
The story really goes all the way back to the 1940s and 50s with those early mainframe computers, right? Those needed very controlled environments to operate.
Right.
So as businesses started adopting those mainframes, We saw the emergence of dedicated IT rooms, and those eventually grew into more sophisticated facilities.
Okay.
In the 80s, the client-server model came along, and that really emphasized this need for centralized IT resources even more.
And then the internet boom really took things to a whole new level.
Absolutely. The internet boom in the 90s, that was a huge turning point. It drove massive demand for places to host websites and online services, and we saw the birth of the modern data center as we know it.
So the internet was the real catalyst.
Very much so.
And then in the 2000s, technologies like virtualization came along.
Yeah, and cloud computing. That really changed how we use servers altogether
Hmm.
and led to these highly efficient and scalable data centers that we see today.
So it's been a constant evolution.
Absolutely. Each stage building on the last, it's been quite a journey to get to where we are today.
So within this evolved landscape, are there different types of data centers that have emerged to cater to these specific needs? I mean, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation, right?
Not at all. Several distinct types have developed over time to meet specific requirements. You have enterprise data centers. These are built and operated by individual companies for their own internal IT needs. They want that control, that customization.
Mhm.
And then there are those co-location data centers, which we touched upon earlier.
Right.
That's where a provider hosts the equipment of multiple organizations.
Okay.
They provide the building, the power, the cooling, all of that.
Interesting.
And then within co-location, you've got different flavors as well.
Okay.
You've got retail co-location, which offers these smaller units, more flexible, shorter-term leases, catering to a wider range of businesses.
Okay.
And then on the other end, you have wholesale co-location, which caters to those large enterprises needing significant space and those longer-term contracts.
Okay.
Then you have hyperscale data centers, the massive facilities run by those cloud providers to support global operations.
Right. Those are the big ones.
Yeah, the giants. And then finally, you have edge data centers. These are smaller facilities.
Okay.
They are strategically located closer to end users to reduce latency.
Okay.
They are crucial for applications like IoT devices and 5G networks, where speed is everything.
So it's a really diverse landscape.
Absolutely. And each type serves a very specific purpose.
Now, focusing on India, what's the current picture in terms of data center capacity? How does it stack up globally?
So as of 2024, India had an installed colocation data center capacity of around 1.35 gigawatts.
Yeah.
Now, that's a significant number, but it's actually considered inadequate to meet the growing demand.
Really?
Yeah, it's playing catch-up. And one interesting thing is that the top 5 players, NTT, SCT, Safai, Citrus, they control a substantial 66% of the operational capacity. So it's quite a concentrated market at the top end.
So those big players really dominate.
Yeah, they have a significant footprint in India.
And geographically, where are these data centers primarily located within India? Is it spread out, or are there specific hubs?
Well, Mumbai, Chennai, and Delhi together account for about 80% of the installed capacity.
Wow.
Mumbai is the clear leader. It's got a significant edge over the others.
Okay.
But Bengaluru is also emerging as a very important data center hub. It's growing rapidly. And a big reason for the dominance of Mumbai and Chennai is that they have these cable landing stations,
Right.
which are crucial for international internet connectivity. So that makes them very attractive locations for those major cloud providers.
So they need that direct connection.
Absolutely. It's all about speed and efficiency.
So we've laid the groundwork. Now let's dig into those drivers. What's fueling this massive demand for data centers in India?
Well, there's several interconnected factors at play. First and foremost is the explosive growth of cloud computing, not just globally, but within India itself. The global cloud market is projected to grow at a 17% compound annual growth rate to reach a massive 1.6 trillion US dollars.
Wow.
We're also seeing this reflected in the revenue growth of the major hyperscalers, which is over 20% year on year. All of that cloud infrastructure needs a physical home, and that's where data centers come in.
It's like a domino effect.
Exactly. One thing leads to another.
Now, I'd imagine that the sheer volume of data that we're all generating and consuming is playing a huge role, right?
Absolutely. Mobile data traffic per user in India has grown at an impressive 19% CAGR over the last 5 years, averaging around 26.6 gigabytes per month. Overall data usage across India has seen an even higher compound annual growth rate of 23% since 2019.
Wow.
And India benefits from some of the lowest data prices in the world.
Right.
That naturally encourages higher consumption. The number of mobile data users is also projected to keep growing.
So it's a perfect storm.
Yeah, in a good way. And all of this data needs to be stored, processed, and delivered efficiently. And once again, that points to the need for more data center capacity.
It all comes back to the data centers.
It does. It's the foundation.
And with the 5G rollout and the growing number of connected devices like smartwatches and smart appliances, it seems like that's just adding more fuel to the fire.
Precisely. The increasing penetration of 4G and the expansion of 5G are significant demand drivers. The number of 4G and 5G subscribers in India is expected to grow at a 10.5% CAGR to reach over 1.1 billion by 2026. What's really striking is that 5G data consumption is projected to increase tenfold between 2023 and 2026. The volume of data generated by these faster networks and all those IoT devices is going to require a substantial increase in data center infrastructure.
It's almost hard to comprehend those numbers.
It is a massive shift.
Now let's talk about AI, because it feels like it's everywhere these days. It seems like AI is integrated into so many aspects of our lives and businesses. How is this impacting the demand for data centers, specifically in India?
AI is proving to be a massive demand driver. AI workloads, especially things like training large language models and other advanced AI applications, they require a huge amount of computational power.
Right.
We're talking about specialized hardware like GPUs running constantly. And the India AI mission, the government's initiative to foster a robust AI ecosystem, includes significant investments in building out GPU infrastructure. And this all translates to a need for data centers designed to handle these high-performance AI environments.
So they need to be purpose-built.
Yeah, and India recently procured over 18,000 advanced compute chips, including those powerful NVIDIA H200 GPUs. So that's a clear indicator of this rapidly growing demand for AI infrastructure.
It's amazing how fast AI is moving.
It's truly remarkable.
Now, this brings us to a really interesting point highlighted in the report, and that's the potential impact of DeepSeek. For those who might not be familiar with them, can you give us a quick overview of who they are and why their technology is relevant to this conversation about data centers?
Sure. So DeepSeek is a Chinese AI startup that has developed these advanced large language models, or LLMs. What's really interesting about them in this context is that their models reportedly achieve comparable performance to other leading models, but they require significantly less computational power,
Oh, wow.
which means lower energy consumption.
Interesting.
So this efficiency potentially allows their AI models to run effectively on data center infrastructure with a lower rack power density in the range of 12 to 20 kilowatts per rack.
And why is this potentially such a positive development for India's data center aspirations? The report refers to it as a serendipitous tailwind, which is an interesting phrase.
Well, here's why it's so interesting. India's current installed data center capacity, while it's growing quickly, tends to have a lower average rack power density, typically in the range of 6 to 12 kilowatts per rack. So this existing capacity might actually be more readily adaptable to handle AI workloads without needing massive upgrades to achieve these super high power densities.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of a fortunate alignment. Also, DeepSeek's models have fueled demand for those high-end NVIDIA H200 chips, which India is also procuring.
Right.
So this confluence of factors could potentially accelerate India's AI readiness, support homegrown AI models, and ultimately drive even broader data center demand as AI applications become more widespread. It's like India's current infrastructure is surprisingly well positioned for this new wave of AI.
That's a fascinating connection. It sounds like India might be ahead of the curve in a way.
Yeah, it's a potential advantage that they can leverage.
Now, looking ahead, what kind of future capacity growth are we projecting for India's data center market? Where do we see things heading in the next few years?
The report projects that India's colocation data center capacity will reach an impressive 5 gigawatts by 2030. That's an incremental addition of about 3.65 gigawatts over the next 5 years. And to achieve that level of growth, it's estimated that about $20 billion in capital investment will be required.
Wow, that's a huge number.
It is, but we're already seeing major investment announcements from colocation operators totaling around $15 billion. That translates to about 2.8 gigawatts of new capacity in the pipeline.
Okay.
Plus, there's capital flowing in from private equity firms and various government initiatives.
Are there any specific companies that have announced particularly large investments that we should know about?
Absolutely. Companies like STT, CFI, Colt, Anant Raj, they've all announced substantial multi-million or even billion-dollar investment plans. And then you have global private equity firms like Blackstone, who are also making significant moves in the Indian data center market.
So there's a lot of momentum behind this.
A lot of money flowing in.
Now let's talk about the financial side of things. What kind of investment does it take per megawatt to actually build one of these data centers in India? What are the costs involved?
The estimated average capital expenditure, or CapEx, per megawatt in India is around 465 million Indian rupees.
Okay.
That's roughly 5.4 million US dollars based on current exchange rates.
Oh, okay.
And when you break down the CapEx, a big chunk goes towards building fit out, things like the internal structure, the security systems.
Right.
Then there's land costs, the shell of the building, the HVAC systems, and the electrical systems. It all adds up.
So it's a significant upfront investment.
Definitely is a capital-intensive business.
What about the additional cost for those cloud providers to install their IT infrastructure within these colocation data centers? Is that a separate investment?
Absolutely. On top of the cost of the data center itself, cloud providers have to invest in their own IT infrastructure.
Right.
So for a greenfield deployment, that's a brand new data center, the total IT infrastructure spend is estimated at about 1,380 million Indian rupees per megawatt.
Okay.
That includes all the servers, storage, networking equipment.
So it's a layered investment.
It is. There are multiple layers to consider.
So how do these data center companies make money? What are the primary business models?
The main models are centered around providing these infrastructure services. The most common one is the colocation model.
Right.
That's where data center operators charge businesses a recurring fee for renting rack space, power, and cooling.
Okay.
And then you have the cloud services model, where providers offer on-demand computing resources, storage, networking, usually with pay-as-you-go or subscription pricing.
Right.
Finally, you have interconnection services, where data centers charge fees for the physical connections between businesses and cloud providers housed within their facilities.
So it's a mix of revenue streams.
Yeah, it's not just one size fits all.
Now, in terms of revenue, what kind of numbers can a data center typically expect from 1 megawatt of colocation capacity in India?
The report estimates that a new megawatt could generate a monthly recurring revenue of around 9,500 Indian rupees per kilowatt. So that translates to annual revenue of around 220 million Indian rupees in the first year.
Okay.
And that revenue is projected to grow at a 6.5% in CAGR over the next decade.
Wow.
So there's a lot of potential there.
Now, these data centers require massive capital up front. How is that typically financed?
A common target debt-to-equity ratio for financing these projects is around 1.0.
Okay.
Given the high initial investment and the stable recurring revenue they generate, debt financing is generally considered viable. To finance that projected capacity growth, it's estimated that around 11.95 billion US dollars in equity will be needed alongside a similar amount of debt.
So it's a balanced approach.
Yeah, a combination of debt and equity.
Now, in terms of profitability, what kind of margins can data centers in India expect, and how does depreciation factor into that?
EBITDA margins for a 1 megawatt capacity are estimated to start around 35% in the first year.
Okay.
Those margins are projected to improve gradually over time, reaching around 43% by the 10th year.
Okay.
Depreciation is a significant expense because those physical assets have a lifespan. The report estimates a 10% annual depreciation rate, so assets are expected to be fully depreciated over 10 years. These projected profitability levels seem to be in line with what we see from global players like Equinix and Digital Realty, as well as Indian players like Cefi.
So it seems like a pretty healthy market in terms of profitability.
Yeah, the fundamentals look pretty solid.
Now let's zoom out a bit. What are some of the key trends shaping the global data center landscape that are relevant to our conversation about India?
Well, globally, the Americas currently hold the largest share of operational data center capacity,
Okay.
but the Asia-Pacific region, including India, is seeing very strong growth in the development pipeline.
Right.
There's also a clear global trend towards improving energy efficiency that's often measured by power usage effectiveness, or PUE.
Right.
Newer data center facilities are being designed to achieve PUE values closer to 1.0. That means a greater proportion of energy is going directly to the IT equipment rather than being wasted on cooling and other infrastructure.
So the lower the PUE, the better.
Absolutely. It's all about efficiency.
Now, in terms of technology, what are some of the key trends and sustainability initiatives gaining traction around the world?
On the technology front, we're seeing wider adoption of advanced cooling technologies like liquid cooling.
Okay.
That helps manage the heat generated by these high-density computing environments, especially for AI and high-performance computing workloads. AI itself is also being used for data center management.
Interesting.
It's helping to optimize energy consumption and even predict potential equipment failures. Edge computing is another major trend, bringing data processing closer to where it's generated.
Right.
And in terms of sustainability, there's a big push towards renewable energy sources to power data centers. We're seeing more energy-efficient technologies being implemented. Even things like waste heat reuse are being explored.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah, it's about looking at every aspect of the operation.
Now, you've mentioned PUE a few times. Can you explain what that metric is for those who might not be familiar and why it's so important?
Sure, power usage effectiveness, or PUE, measures how efficiently a data center uses energy.
Yeah.
You calculate it by dividing the total energy consumed by the entire facility by the energy used by the IT equipment itself. Ideally, you want a PUE as close to 1.0 as possible.
Okay.
That means 100% of the energy is going to the computing itself, with no waste. Historically, data centers had much higher PUE values.
Okay.
So it's a critical metric because it impacts operational costs. A lower PUE means lower energy bills. It's also important for the environment.
Right.
A lower PUE means a smaller carbon footprint. It's also often used as a key performance indicator and sometimes even mandated by regulators as an energy efficiency benchmark.
So it's a key metric to watch.
It's a simple but powerful way to gauge how green and cost-effective a data center is.
What types of data centers typically manage to achieve the lowest PUE scores?
Hyperscale data centers, those massive facilities run by the big cloud providers, they tend to achieve the lowest PUE values.
Okay.
They're designed from the ground up with energy efficiency in mind at scale. They use advanced cooling techniques, optimized airflow-efficient power systems. Newer data centers, in general, tend to have lower PUEs compared to older ones. Location matters, too. Data centers in cooler climates can use free air cooling for part of the year. That significantly reduces their reliance on mechanical cooling.
So a lot of factors come into play.
It's a complex interplay of design, technology, and location.
We also talked about edge computing earlier. Why is this approach becoming increasingly important in a market like India?
Edge computing involves processing data closer to where it's generated rather than sending it back to those centralized cloud data centers. That proximity is crucial for applications that need very low latency, meaning minimal delays in processing. Things like autonomous vehicles, industrial automation, even telemedicine applications.
Right. Speed is everything.
Absolutely. By processing data locally, you minimize those delays. Edge computing also helps alleviate strain on network bandwidth by processing and filtering data locally. For a country like India, with its vast geography, edge computing is becoming more and more important. It can handle the massive growth in data traffic, support 5G and IoT deployments, and enable a wider range of services for more people.
So it's about bringing the power of computing closer to the user.
Exactly, distributing the intelligence.
Finally, what are some of the key factors that influence where data centers are located? What are the strategic considerations?
There are several critical factors. First, robust connectivity is essential. You need to be close to major internet exchange points and have access to those dense fiber optic networks.
Right, to ensure that speed.
Exactly. Speed is key. Reliable and cost-effective power is another big one. You can't have a data center without reliable power.
Makes sense.
Availability of suitable real estate with room for future expansion is also a key consideration. Then there's access to a skilled workforce, both for construction and ongoing operations. Data centers tend to be located in those demand clusters where you have a high concentration of businesses and cloud users.
Right.
And for applications that need really low latency, proximity to end users is a major driver. Regulatory and policy support, including incentives from state governments, can also influence decisions. Increasingly, things like cooler climates to reduce cooling costs and data localization regulations are also playing a bigger role.
So it's a complex decision-making process.
It's about balancing a lot of different factors.
This has been a really insightful deep dive into India's data center landscape. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. It's a fascinating space.
Just to recap those key takeaways for our listeners, we are seeing explosive growth in India's data center market. It's being driven by cloud adoption, rising data consumption, the 5G rollout, and the growing AI sector. The India AI mission and the emergence of these more efficient AI models, like those from DeepSeek, present both opportunities and challenges.
Yeah.
And we're seeing massive investment commitments with the sector evolving rapidly. New technologies are emerging, sustainability is becoming a bigger focus, and the potential scale of the market, that projected $100 billion enterprise value, is really quite staggering.
It's mind-boggling.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question.
Okay.
Given India's unique demographic, its digital transformation, and the nuances of its data center infrastructure, how might the evolution of India's data center infrastructure not just mirror those global trends, but potentially leapfrog certain stages?
Yeah.
Especially with the advent of AI-optimized and energy-efficient solutions, what kind of unexpected applications and innovations might this unlock for India and its citizens? It's something to ponder as we continue to watch this remarkable growth story unfold.
It's a really exciting time to be following this space, that's for sure.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon to explore another fascinating topic.
Sounds great.